So my first reason why I'm here in Sicily is to get my dual citizenship. The second thing is to learn more about my ancestral background and genealogy. You know, it's a weird thing to be here in Caccamo, where my own background, my own last name is a part of the fabric of this town. I have been living for 22 years on a Mennonite farm in the middle of the Amish country in Pennsylvania. If you'd like to learn more about those episodes, click on the episodes that we'll put in the description, so that you can see a little bit of the how, what, where, when, why of Amish and Mennonite culture in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Let's just say it has been a journey. The Mennonites that I have been living among, they play something called the Mennonite game. This would be people who don't know each other, but only try to figure it out through the names of the family. So for example, I could be in the grocery store in Pennsylvania and a little old Mennonite lady in a covering will say, "Oh, you're Kristen Hertzog, aren't you?" And then I know how this goes. I say, "Why, yes, what is your name?" And she says her name, and her name is a last name that I know is connected somehow to the family tree of my husband. And we find out, oh, we're like 8th cousins once removed through marriage, through blah, 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 blah. And then I keep going to buy like my creamer and my milk and my eggs in the dairy section. Now it's my turn. This is the first time in my marriage that I have been the one where the tables are turned. And I literally was at the tobacco shop, not to buy tobacco, guys. They have soda, they have milk, they have eggs there. So no freaking out, okay? But I went into the tobacco shop and I was going to pick up some milk. And a guy comes up to me and goes, "Cugina." And I'm like, "Who's this guy?" He goes, "What is your last name?" And I said, "Oh, my maiden name is Anselmo." "Ah, we're related because you're so-and-so and my so-and-so and this person married that person. We're cousins." Crazy to be on the flip side of this. Now I understand why my husband is such a genealogy nerd, because it's really exciting to feel a larger sense of connection to the people, to the town, to the world around you by sheerly who you're genetically related to. It's really, really priceless, and it's hard to describe to people who've never been in a situation like this. When my family immigrated from Sicily to the United States, over time, the families, these distant families, got separated even more. I was able to be fortunate enough to connect with the town genealogist, Mr. Felipo. There's 2 ways here in Italy that you can get additional information on your ancestral bloodline. The first one is through the civic records, the town hall, or what they call here the Comune, that was responsible for keeping track of the births, the deaths, and the marriages and the baptisms of everyone in the town. I was lucky enough to get connected with Mr. Felipo, who allowed me access into the civic records inside of the Comune. So these would be the non-religious formal documents of this entire town. And I was able to find my first cousin once removed, Carmela, all of her family, learn about more extended family in the town through the San Fratello line. My family has always been curious about my Anselmo line because 2 generations of men were abandoned in the town. And I wanted to learn information about that. Where were they born? Where were they given up for adoption? Who took care of them? And most of all, who were the genetic bloodline, the last name of the people who actually bore that child? All of these things came to a head in the last 2 days. So let me get my book and I'll show you what I mean. So here's the deal. I found out that my great-great-grandfather was born in 1844 and that he was actually birthed at the Proletto Hospital. I had no idea where this hospital was. In 2017, when I was here with my family, we looked high and low for where this hospital was that was unnamed. We assumed it was on the outskirts of town in a rural area. Well, here, I literally get my hair done here in Sicily in the same building of the original hospital where my great-great-grandfather was born. Is that not bizarre? Like 2 totally different things going on. Now I was ready to go to my great-great-great-grandfather's line. But the genealogist of the town said, Christina, I'm sorry, the whole civil records, all the government records in the town of Caccamo stop at 1820. So he said, I want you to contact the priest at the original ancestral church, which happens to be 5 minutes from my house where I live, called San Giorgio. He said, talk to the priest, introduce yourself, tell him you want to see the church records, tell him that I will come with you. Well, I had no idea why all of those pieces were so critical. I went over to see the priest. I went in the church 4 times, no priest. All I found was a guy on the side of the church looking at the Virgin Mary praying every time I walked in this enormous cathedral. I was just kind of like trying to ignore him because I didn't want to disturb him from his prayers. So finally, the 4th time I look over and I'm like, does this guy not have a job? I mean, what is this guy doing? He's in this church all the time. And so I walked over to him the 4th time and I'm like, Excuse, signore, I'm sorry to bother you from your prayers, but I'm looking for Father Giacomo. And he goes, oh yes, I'm Father Giacomo. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're the priest? I'm like, I'm sorry. I said, you don't have the collar and the thing, like there's no things that tell me you're a priest. He said, yeah, well, I like to pray comfortably. I was like, that's awesome. Me too. How you doing? And I said, I'd like to come here. I'd like to see the church records. Will you allow this? Will you allow me, along with Mr. Felipo, to come into the church to look at the documents? I'm looking for my family. I showed him the book. He said, I'll talk to Mr. Felipo. Very serious. I said, okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you. May I have your WhatsApp? We exchanged numbers. And then I got the text from him. He said, yes, talk to Mr. Felipo. We're going to work it out. Mr. Felipo contacts me like an hour later. Can you come to the church at 9 a.m.? We got an appointment. I got to the church. I was all excited. You know, it's just like unfinished family business for like all these years. Father Giacomo escorted us in. We go back through the sacristy. There's all the ancient robes on the walls that are in glass, beautiful paintings from like the Middle Ages. So we kind of walked through like a narrow hallway at first. And then there was like a big, like almost like a ginormous conference room for priests. I don't know, bishops. It was like beautiful, huge chandelier, beautiful paintings, stained glass windows. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like there must be so many books here. Like this is such an old church. This is going to be like a library, like huge library of books. And then he escorts us into a room twice the size of my kitchen. And I'm like, oh, this is the room? He takes us to what is the size of like a corner cupboard in a house in the United States. Like this is not like a big library. This is like a wooden cabinet with a key. So he's got the key. He opens the thing. He opens it up and it's literally 5 shelves of the history of every single person who was birthed, baptized, Holy Communion, marriage, death in the town since 1555. I couldn't believe my eyes, and I couldn't believe I was standing in front of that kind of history, that was something that was just so incredible to me. Then I understood why it was so important that I mentioned to Father Giacomo that Mr. Felipo, the genealogist of the town, take me there, because everything before 1820, every single record was in Latin. I don't know Latin. I can barely ask for milk at the store in Italian. Everything is in super scripted, fancy Latin. Everything. 1820 to 1555. Latin. Well, I don't know a single person in my life who speaks, knows, or understands Latin. But I know one person who does, and his name is Mr. Felipo. Mr. Felipo has years and years of training in the language of Latin. And he was able to go through all of these different generations of books and find out more secrets about my family tree. Here's what he found out. So we were able to trace back my great-grandfather, Rosario Leto. He was born in Caccamo in November of 1851. We were able to find a document that states his original name. One of the documents showed in the parentheses, if you will, that the last name was Prioleto. Nobody in our family has ever seen that name anywhere on any document. Prioleto, not Leto. Oh, and then of course that led us to his literal birthday, but we can't go any further because there were so many Prioletos that were in this town. Nobody is able to go further than that. Interesting stuff. Very soon, I'm going to take you on a trip so that you can see the hospital where my great-great-grandfather was born, where he was sadly placed in the wheel, or the Routa, which is a wheel placed on the side that rotates like this, where babies were placed that were not able to be cared for by the parents, and then the wheel was spun into another building where another person was asked to pick up the baby and take the baby to the church so that the church could help find a way to care for the child. There are so many abandoned babies from this town for like 100 years. It was really sad to just look name after name after name of people who simply could not afford their children. They could not afford to take care of them, and they gave them to the church, praying that God would forgive them and praying that they would still have a better life than what they could afford to cover. I've been working in Haiti for a long time. I've heard some very intimate stories about people in the country of Haiti in modern times who just can't afford to take care of their kids. They want to, they have the desire to. It's almost like more love for them to allow that child to be moved to somebody else so that they can provide a better life for that child. And just the inner conflict that must be for a parent. I can never relate to that. You know, here I am looking at my own family tree and saying, wow, people in my family sobbed. People in my family literally had to go through a grieving process because of not being able to take care of their child, and must have felt that hopelessness and that discouragement and maybe that guilt of looking at the situation and saying, I have no choice here. Just the shame that one might feel to have to put their child in that wheel and turn that crank, knowing that that child may never, ever know where they come from. So I'm going to take you with me right now. We are going to discover the Prioleto Hospital. We are going to try to find the wagon wheel, or the Routa, where my great-great-grandfather would have been abandoned. You know, it really is fascinating to think how small the world is. I tend to think of everything as being so far away. But once you're here, everything's like really, really close. And it's fascinating to think about that. You know, the very cobblestones I'm walking on right now in this second could have been the exact cobblestones that my ancestors in their own shoes would have walked. And I will tell you, this is not an easy path. Here, let me show you. So sadly, this is the hospital. It says Ospedale Civico, and this would have been the original hospital, Prioleto Hospital. And in 1844, my sad little great-great-grandfather, Girolamo Anselmo, would have been abandoned here at this very building. So my goal on my little trip here is to see if I can find the Routa. As you can see, this is an abandoned building. I don't want to kill myself or get yelled at. So we're going to be incognito as much as we can. So this would have been the front door of the hospital. No doubt many, many women would have come in here in chaos, in labor, to have their babies. Many of their ancestors floating all over the world today, doing their life, not thinking about these things. There's some Latin there that I have to find out what that says. So this is the back of the hospital, the old hospital. This is Cortile Ospedale Vecchio, the old hospital court. I'm looking for something that's unusual built into the wall. Something that would house something specific. What is this? What is this? I'm terrified. Oh my God. What is this? Is this it? Guys, I'm an adventurous person, but I'm not really that daring. Oh my gosh. Do you see anything that looks like where an ancient iron wagon wheel on the side might have been? If anybody knows what I'm looking for. All right, so I'm not seeing anything, but this is a peculiar, almost like a storehouse maybe. And then I see something up there that looks like a giant hole. Maybe that was for some kind of ventilation. The thing about looking for old stuff like this is that it's really hard to know where the layers of these houses are. I'm amazed at how many different rocks, how they used whatever was available to repair the walls, the stucco. Like, what is this? What was this thing? I don't even know. Maybe it was for like a donkey or something. You know, you got to bring your wife in because she's pregnant and she's about to have a baby, and you put your donkey in here, and then you run up to the door and you say, please, please, I need to have our baby here. And they say, we're sorry, there's no room at the inn. I mean, there's no room at the Prioletto Civicale Ospedale. Hey, it could happen, guys. It could totally happen. I'm not seeing anything weird, but I got this crazy vibe right now that if you were going to give up your baby, it would be like in this alleyway, and probably would not be like in the front of the building. Let's go check the other side. Oh, isn't that pretty? Like, there's Mary. She's just like chilling there, praying for you. So it's hard to know where the actual back of the hospital is. I am sure the hospital is far older than 1844. So by then there may have been some additions. There may have been some places that were torn down and rebuilt. Check out this doorway. Wow. I wouldn't think that that would be very safe, but it must have been reinforced because this was not built yesterday. Holy cow. Let's check down this alleyway. See what's going on. So here is what was one time a window. So beautiful in its own rustic way. Oh my gosh. Do you think there's enough steps here, guys? I mean, seriously. I'm getting muscly in my legs, but the high carbohydrates are another story that we can't discuss. I don't think this was part of the hospital. You know, I got to thinking as we're talking here, and here's the front. Isn't that pretty? So guys, this is a super weird side note on the proximity of how close everything happens in the old world. This is the hospital where most of the town children would have been born. This over here is the mother church of the town. This is San Giorgio Church. This would have been where my ancestors would have been married, where they would have been christened, gotten their sacraments. But get this, ignore the construction equipment. Can you see that townhouse right there? That townhouse is also where another line of my family would have called their home. This would have been a more wealthy family member on the other side of the family. And here's a great example of how life continues to move on. This is my hair salon in part of the original hospital where I'm sure so much joy and pain occurred. They're not open at the moment, and here we are. This is the main square. Well, guys, I don't feel like I was successful at finding the location of the actual Routa where my great-great-grandfather would have been placed when abandoned. However, I am not giving up because I'm not that type of girl. So I'm going to talk with the genealogist in the town and see if there's any other possible items that he could share with me, or perhaps he even knows where the Routa would have been. But I continue to find adventure in this experience. I continue to be amazed and surprised and disappointed and surprised again at this whole experience of being here in Italy during this season of my life. And I can't wait to continue to share more with you.